Hello and welcome to the For the English podcast, your one-stop shop for Venezuelan football in English, bringing you fortnightly episodes dedicated to the Venezuelan league, the national teams and the myriad of Venezuelan players around the world. Today, Dominic and I will be taking a look back at last week's World Cup qualifiers for the Vinotinto and looking forward to the Copa America, which starts this weekend. This is going out on the Saturday, and tomorrow, Sunday, Venezuela will start their campaign with a game against hosts Brazil. Last-minute host Brazil after Argentina and Colombia both dropped out as hosts for different reasons. But ultimately, Brazil, despite the situation in the country of COVID, have now taken on the mantle of running it their second consecutive hosting of the tournament, which for many has made them, if they weren't already, favourites. Dominic, how are you?
I'm great, Jordan.
I'm looking forward to discussing Venezuela's Copa America. In the past week, I've probably become less looking forward to the Copa America itself, particularly for Venezuela, and mainly for the absences. It's really difficult to overlook the absence of Yordan Osorio in defence. Soteldo obviously called up despite his injury, but will be missing from at least the first two games. Darwin Machis. Wilker Angel, a late dropout with COVID, and of course Salomon Rondon, the big one up front. How are you feeling despite the obviously massive absences?
Yeah, it's hard to say because I don't think I've necessarily lost much of the positivity I had. I just don't think I had a huge amount to start. We'll get more into the format and everything. I think the format for the group stage is at least in Venezuela's favor in getting out of the group stage. But what we've seen over the last week definitely is leaving me a little unsure what comes after that, particularly because even though there are a couple names back in the mix now, they've pretty much just been exchanged for an additional list of key players that no longer are going to be available. So I'm still hopeful that we're going to have some entertaining matches. I'm not hugely optimistic about how far we're going to be going, though.
Yeah, for those who are listening, who perhaps aren't familiar with the format of this year's Copa America, because it is different to the previous one, the last one. There's two groups of five, and all but one from each group will advance to the knockout stages. So it's only the team finishing fifth in either group bottom that will go out. And Venezuela's group is hosts Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. And it's also in that order that Venezuela will face their opposition. So an opening game against Brazil. Obviously in Copa America 2019, Venezuela-Brazil, despite being 0-0, was probably the game I enjoyed most in hindsight. I did not enjoy it at the time, especially when 8 minutes added on went up. It was a colossal defensive performance, saved a few times by VAR as well. How do you think it's going to go this time round?
You know, it's interesting because you note the 2019 match, which was 0-0, and even the last World Cup qualifier that was played, I think that was last fall, with Brazil. That was 1-0, a Firmino goal second half. It was, from what I recall, kind of a mistake goal, almost kind of a fumbled tap-in. So Venezuela actually has a reasonably positive record facing the team that is easily the best in South America right now, in standing and in recent trophies. So I feel dangerously optimistic that we'll get something out of it. I'm not very confident that we're going to win, but this team does seem to have a recent ability to get at least tight results, which is not something a lot of countries can say right now with Brazil. So that gives me something to hope for sure.
Yeah, and I think you said about the sort of absence of positivity maybe you had even before the sad dropouts. I think one reason people were perhaps feeling quite positive going into this Copa America is there's been quite a lot of optimism up until a week ago, perhaps, behind Jose Peseiro. Obviously, he's been in the job for over a year now, but we hadn't seen much of him until late 2020 because of COVID. But Venezuela ended 2020 on a fairly good note. You mentioned the defeat to Brazil. To go away to Brazil and only lose 1-0 was fairly admirable because it was an organised defensive display. And then the year ended with a 2-1 win against Chile, and a late Rondon goal, a Soteldo assist to really add to the feeling of triumph for a late win. And then we had Bolivia away. Going into that, there was quite a bit of positivity, and then we lost 3-1 in La Paz, and it wasn't a good performance at all. And then 0-0 against Uruguay. You look at that, I think a lot of people that perhaps only know South American football for the big hitters will think Venezuela getting a goalless draw to Uruguay is a good result. But, you know, Jose Martinez actually put Venezuela into the lead early on for it to be given, chalked off for handball. The positivity or the lack of positivity now that's building around the fans of Venezuela, do you put it down to more than just the absences? I know a lot of people think Venezuela is still struggling for an identity post Dudamel.
To a degree, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't feel like there's been a consistent, and to be fair to Peseiro, part of this is because players haven't been available, but match to match, it doesn't feel like the same team in style, certainly in starters. So, I mean, even in these last two games, felt like a completely different mindset for both different players in key positions. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think that helps to not necessarily know for sure what it is you're even rooting for. That Bolivia result, and we talked about this when this was all happening, the Uruguay draw isn't a bad result. It is a good result. The problem is it was paired with a horrible result.
Yeah. So
if we get anything in Bolivia, even a draw, if we get 2 points out of this break, I think this goes down as a positive break.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's almost as much points as we got in the rest of the 4 games so far. I mean, it's, you know, and one of which being an away result. I think the 0-0 isn't a problem other than the loss that comes before it. So whatever was going into that Bolivia, whatever plan he thought he had for that Bolivia game, that needs to stop. There was so much wrong with that starting 11, in my opinion. I think in your opinion as well. There were, you know, player selections that made no sense. The rhythm of the game. I know Bolivia is supposed to be a hard place to play, but that seems a little redundant to me. Most South American countries have stadiums in the Andes Mountains. I mean, at a certain point, you got to kind of stop like writing it off as like, oh, it's in a high place. It was really, really disappointing to see how that game played out. At certain points, it felt like the scoreline should have been worse. So now the Uruguay result again was much better, and the starting 11 was much better in my opinion. But that sort of like up and down between those two games feels very reminiscent to often what was happening under Dudamel. And so that for me, to your original sort of question, your original point, that to me is that point of concern of like, there are aspects of this that are feeling better, but I'm still seeing that weird rhythm that we had before, where it's like, we'll have a good run and then all of a sudden there'll be a game and it's like, what is going on? What is this 11? What is this formation? None of this makes any sense. Where did this come from? So yeah, that's the concern for me, and I do think that's being reflected in the fan base's opinion for sure.
So we're 6 games into the CONMEBOL World Cup qualifiers, 6 of 18, so a third of the way in, and Venezuela sit 9th, which is second from bottom, but 4 points off of 5th being what's needed to get a playoff spot to qualify for the World Cup. And also similarly 4 points off of 4th, Uruguay, which is enough for automatic qualification. So despite the record of 1-1-4, 4 points isn't a massive gulf, and we're only a third way into qualification. Obviously the dream is to qualify for the World Cup, but what is your realistic expectation for the remaining 2/3 of qualifying?
I think the math is there for us to reasonably compete for 4th and 5th. That is, I'm by no means sure that we're going to get either of them, but the math is still in our favor because this whole table has been pretty hectic, except for the top 2, for us to at least stay in the conversation for 4th and 5th, which is not what happened for 2018, right? For the last like 2 or 3 breaks of 2018, we were already way out, couldn't even come close. So staying competitive for those 2 spots for me is at least a drastic show of improvement from the previous World Cup cycle. And I think the math and, assuming players are healthy by the next games, which are all, months away, the math and the roster strength is there potentially for us to do that. Whether or not it, ends up perfectly and we actually get fourth or fifth, it's out of our hands to a degree. It also depends on other teams' form, but I think that's the expectation for me.
Yeah, and you mentioned the roster strength being there, and it's what I've sort of defaulted my answer to when people have asked me, can Venezuela qualify for Qatar? And I've said, if you base it on just on pitch, the strongest 11, then I think yes, the strongest 11 of Venezuela is probably, I hope, would on its day the fifth strongest in South America. But as we know, there's so much off the pitch that affects not just Venezuela, but also World Cup qualifiers. For those who are listening and aren't aware of the selection for Copa America, we'll just run through it now. Goalkeepers are Joel Graterol, Wilker Fariñas, and Rafael Romo. Graterol started both World Cup qualifiers, his first two appearances for the senior national team. I know a lot of South American football fans in general have Wilker Fariñas in their fantasy football team for the Copa America as a probably undervalued option. But is he even going to start?
I mean, it's interesting because this has been a topic of conversation for, easily a year, right? Should Fariñas even be playing? Because he's not really playing for his club. There's been a lot of people that support him in that conversation, but that question has been there for a while. I think Graterol didn't hurt his reputation with his performances. I thought that he wasn't really at fault for any of the goals in the Bolivia loss. Maybe he could have done better, but you can always say that when a goal's conceded. And then obviously he followed that up with a clean sheet. So, he certainly helped his case. And in both games made some very nice saves. I still think that, what's that phrase, the 800-pound gorilla in the room or whatever, is that, Fariñas is probably the most naturally gifted goalkeeper around, maybe even outside of Venezuela. Of course, the problem is that he's just simply not playing for Lens. So I have a feeling that Graterol is probably going to play in the Copa America. If Peseiro is willing to invest in him for these two games and it was relatively positive, why wouldn't you? What would be the point of resting Fariñas and not having him warm?
Yeah, particularly when the message coming out of the national team camp from players and Peseiro himself was that the World Cup qualifiers were being treated with more importance than the Copa America. So you presume we saw two of Peseiro's strongest 11s. Like you said correctly earlier, we saw two very different 11s, but you'd hope, considering that's where he was saying the importance would be, we were seeing a taste of his insight into where he thinks his strongest players are. And this goalkeeper discussion hasn't even covered Rafa Romo, a 6'6" goalkeeper, when Fariñas and Graterol are both barely over 6 foot. And statistically, one of the best goalkeepers in Europe last season, made the most saves in the Belgian league, is being looked at by Anderlecht and a couple of others. But yeah, he hasn't even entered the discussion. It would be interesting to see if he does play at all. I suspect he won't. But Venezuela are flush with decent goalkeepers at the moment. If we move on to the defence, we've got Roberto Rosales, Alexander Gonzalez, Ronald Hernandez, so three right backs, John Chancellor, Nahuel Feresi, Adrian Martinez, Mikel Villanueva, Johan Kumana, and Luis Mago. In the defence, there was a lot of criticism levelled in Bolivia and the Uruguay game, despite the clean sheet against Uruguay. And a lot of it came down to the probably static and slow-paced defending. We saw the word lazy a lot. I think it's harsh to defend, harsh to label a defense lazy in a game where your backs are to the wall. Like, can you be lazy? But in that situation, but one shining light from the Uruguay game was Ferraresi, who now everyone is saying he has to start. Do you expect him to start after that performance against Uruguay?
I would not protest it at all. I think he has had a really solid season in Portugal. So he's coming into this arguably with one of the better league forms of the defenders we have, right? I mean, we're talking about, well, Angel's not in here anymore, but he was, lower table Russian Premier League side. Chancellor wasn't playing in a first division league. Villanueva also had a very good year, to be fair. But anyway, to the point, Ferraresi had a really good league season. He looked really good against Uruguay, one of the few defenders that did. One of the few defenders that didn't consistently turn over the ball and just pass it straight to an Uruguay player every time they got it, which was another big problem that game. I would completely support him starting. I don't know where he starts in the back line because I don't know what Peseiro wants to do, because he has experience as a center back and as a left back. But I would by all means like to see him.
Yeah, and he would have, had it not been chalked off, got the assist for Jose Martinez's goal, a very good ball out of the back. I'm pleased to see a late call-up for Ronald Hernandez. I'm a big fan of his. I think 2020 was a big sucker punch for his career. How it went with Aberdeen has seemingly had a hangover effect as well. He hasn't hit the ground running at Atlanta, which I was really hoping.
No.
As somebody that
some starts for the second team, but that's about it. Yeah.
As somebody that watches a lot of MLS and knows it really well, Dominic, do you expect him to dislodge Brooks Lennon at right back, or is he gonna have to make do at Atlanta too for the season, do you think?
I'm not sure, because the thing, Atlanta hasn't had an amazing start to the year. They've had some good results, but generally not necessarily what the expectation would be for them as a pretty successful team. So that would lead you to believe that maybe there would be a changing of the guard upcoming. At the same time, Lennon has been a frequently highlighted player when the games do go well for them. So it's definitely going to be hard for him to get that spot, just to be honest. I'm curious. He hasn't really had much success coming off the bench either, which I think is probably what needs to be his first goal, is getting into a position where he makes sense to them as a substitute. But yeah, it's going to be tough for him to get a lot of minutes this season, just because he is trying to dislodge a player that is a favorite for the fans, one that's acclaimed pretty highly by the league. So there's a lot up in the air for him, to be honest.
He had a good Copa America 2019. I think that's obviously 2017 with the under-20s is where he caught wider attention. But I think he had a solid Copa America 2019, and that probably did, as well as his good season in Norway, lead to Aberdeen taking a liking to him.
Right.
But as we move into the midfield, Thomas Rincon, who didn't fly with the national team to Brazil yesterday. The national team arrived this morning. We're recording this on Friday, by the way. Yangel Herrera, who missed the World Cup qualifiers, but has been called up for the Copa America. Junior Moreno, Christian Cáceres, Edson Castillo, Caracas FC midfielder, making his first tournament debut if he plays. Bernardo Manzano at Deportivo Lara in Liga Football. Jose Martinez, Romulo Otero, Jefferson Savarino, Richard Celis, again from Caracas FC. John Murillo and Yeferson Soteldo, who will definitely miss the first two games, Brazil and Colombia, with injury, and hoping that he'll be fit for Ecuador and Peru. For me, there weren't many surprises in the midfield. How do you feel about it?
I feel relatively positive. I'm interested to see that, we'll have the three starting midfielders from that win against Chile back, which were Moreno, Herrera, and Cáceres. So it'd be interesting, especially because Rincon seems to be a little up in the air in terms of availability. It'd be interesting to see if we have those three starting maybe against Brazil. Obviously that's a higher task than Chile, but they did very well against Chile. So it'd be interesting to see if we have that happen. But yeah, I mean, generally this list has a lot of the people I would want on it. It's missing Machis. It's potentially missing Rincon, even though he's on there. But Murillo's good to have back. Soteldo hopefully is actually back. Savarino was good when he played the World Cup qualifiers this last week. So there's some positive points in there for sure. Oh, yeah. And Jose Martinez, I hope gets more of a look than he got in the last two games.
Definitely. And that's probably the one thing I'd say about the midfield. 12 midfielders. I'd say if you split the midfield into defensive and attacking-minded players, you've got 7 defensive-minded players. Right. And 5 attacker-minded players. The 7 being Rincon, Herrera, Moreno, Cáceres, Castillo, Manzano, and Martinez. And I just query whether it was necessary to have 7. Perhaps one of Castillo or Manzano could have stayed at home in order to take another striker. Because if we come to the strikers, no Salomon Rondon is the main talking point. But then the ones that have been called up, Josef Martinez, Fernando Aristeguieta, Sergio Cordova, and Honda Cariz. No space for Eric Ramirez is what most people are talking about.
Right.
Do you think he should have been called up? I think it's a no-brainer after his season in Slovakia. But the great guys at El Mundo es un Balón, whose coverage has been superb of this national team camp, have reported that it was a decision based on what Peseiro saw at the national team camp in training. I'm surprised because, I'm not Cordova's biggest fan. And similarly, I think Cadiz has had, I think it's fair to say, an up and down past 18 months, whereas Ramirez has just gone from strength to strength.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I understand that maybe, and look, we weren't in the camp. Who knows what the professional coaches saw and didn't see? So that's obviously the asterisk to whatever we say here. But with Cadiz, I guess there's the benefit of knowing that he's been playing freshly. Obviously being in MLS, which has summer season. He hasn't been amazing this season. He got 2 early goals and since then has been a little bit dull, league form wise. And when he played the last 2 games, it kind of looked like what you expect, which is just there wasn't a ton there. When he maybe gets his head on it, it looks a little dangerous. Aristeguieta, I don't know how I feel about that one because I know that he brings a lot of experience compared to the rest of the forwards available, but he doesn't have the MLS advantage of being fresh because the Mexican league ended over a month ago. They haven't been playing recently.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have that benefit, even though technically they play into the summer. So then he's also not playing in a high level league. He's not playing in Europe. He didn't have great form when he was playing. So other than the experience, I don't see what he brings in comparison to someone like Eric Ramirez, who's playing in a reasonably strong league, certainly at least in Europe, and was doing very well. So between Cadiz and Aristeguieta, I don't know how Ramirez doesn't get in that 4. Yeah, it's very confusing to me.
And I was really pleased to see Jose Martinez do so well against Uruguay for 2 reasons. Firstly, this time last year, I say this time last year? No, because of COVID. Maybe 18 months ago, we didn't know whether we'd see him in a Venezuela shirt again. He made it pretty clear that he wasn't going to play for the foreseeable. And it was obviously the change in head coach from Dudamel to Peseiro that led to the change of heart.
Well, and then as soon as he said he'd come back, he got injured for a year. So
even after the head coach change and even with the injury laying him off for so long, there were still things said that can't be unsaid. He made the comments about Rondon and Rincon, and you wonder if there was going to be a way back when they're such hierarchical players in the team. But Rincon came out and said it was water under the bridge. Face-to-face conversations had been had and everything was okay. And then Martinez comes out and scores inside the first 10-15 minutes against Uruguay just for it to be ruled offside, but looked really fresh and looked really sharp. Had a couple of headed efforts throughout the game, and he's not the biggest striker on the pitch at all. I think it's really positive what we saw from him. So I think there is, I have no concerns over Jose Martinez, and I know he's not a massively popular amongst a wider fan base, but I still think Fernando Aristeguieta has a lot to offer against certain opposition. I'm not sure Cordova or Cadiz are great options off the bench if we're looking at a tired Martinez and we're looking to make changes. So if we look at the group with Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, as we've said, do you see us getting out of the group, and where do you see the points coming?
So, I mean, if the math makes sense in my head is correct, essentially what we need is something against Peru and something against Ecuador, and we're through. So if that's the bottom line, if that's the bare minimum, we can do that. We can absolutely do that. Peru hasn't had a very good run of qualifiers either. They've done relatively poor. Ecuador has done better, but that's still a team that I see weaknesses in. They conceded quite a few goals. So it's by all means possible for us to get that bare minimum. Obviously, we are in a group with two of the better performing teams in the continent, including the best performing team. That's going to be really tough. So I don't see us getting probably higher than third. I think that would be insane if we managed to get higher than that. And then the concern becomes, is what happens every time going to happen where we get drawn against the best team from the other group and lose immediately? But yeah, I'm pretty, maybe I sounded negative earlier, but I'm pretty sure we'll get out of this, at least.
No, I think if we finish fourth, we would be playing whoever wins the other group,
right?
Which is composed of Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Chile, and Bolivia. So I think that's probably on paper a more competitive group than Venezuela's group. I know Chile are sort of at the end of a generation, and we saw Uruguay, against Venezuela, and not at their strongest, struggling to score. But Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, and Paraguay, they're four teams that you're going to presume of going through, and it's Bolivia that will miss out. Right. So if Venezuela finishes fourth, it's whoever finishes top, and most likely you'd say that's Argentina. Peru are bottom of the World Cup qualifiers with no friendlies in the past 18 months because of COVID. That is the form guide. How is World Cup qualification looking? And you've got Brazil at the top, played 6, won 6. And then you have Ecuador in order of where they're ranking in the World Cup qualifiers in Venezuela's group. Ecuador are third. They've won 3 and lost 3. Then Colombia, who have got a 2-2-2 record. One of their 2 wins, of course, coming against Venezuela in match day 1. And then Peru at the bottom of the group on the same points as Venezuela, 4, with the same record of 1-1-4, but with a worse goal difference, -8 to -6. They've shipped 14 goals in their opening 6 games. Venezuela, to be fair to them, have only shipped 9. Ecuador in third place in the group have shipped more at 10. Colombia have shipped 13. Bolivia and Peru at 14. So despite the fact that there has only been 1 win for Venezuela so far, their defense has been fairly tight, which, having seen us play against Bolivia recently, is not synonymous with that description. So ultimately, Venezuela hoping to get 4th place, but maybe getting 3rd will give them a better chance of getting through than the next knockout round. In 2019, it was Argentina in the first knockout phase, and of course that ended in defeat for Venezuela. We know straight after the Copa America, in terms of the international calendar, it's going to be chock-a-block as we play catch-up of COVID, with 2 games, I believe, in September, 2 in October, and 2 in November to get on track for Qatar. I've seen this poll going around a few different outlets on Twitter and found it quite interesting. Would you be using this Copa America, if you're going into this Copa America as the team, as the one setting the tempo, if you had a choice between playing to win the Copa America, playing to get out the group stage, or using the Copa America as a series of 4 games to build an identity and just use it as an opportunity to test out players, how would you be approaching this Copa America as a Venezuela head coach? What do you think is the most efficient way of approaching this?
It's tough because I think it's unfortunate that we played the better teams in our group first. Because if we played Ecuador and Peru first, we could do the job there, secure a place in the knockouts, and then experiment with the games we have left. And we could do a little bit of both. But that's not how this is going to be able to play out, because unless we somehow beat Brazil and Colombia, those last 2 games are going to be vital. So then back to your question, I understand the pragmatism of wanting to just use this as a test, but that feels deeply wrong to me.
Yeah.
To not try. It's any team, if you're in a competition that you've never won before or never made the final of before, I don't think you get to just say it doesn't matter
Mhm.
and still, and still say you're playing for some like people like that just doesn't work for me. If that's what they do, then that's what they do, and I'll watch it. But I would deeply prefer that they actually give it a go. I understand that there could be ramifications for the qualifiers in the fall, but I mean, with that same rationale, you could say, "Oh, we play Argentina in September. Don't try that game.
Yeah,
Focus on the other games. Like you have to try. You're playing. You have to try." So
cool.
I
So
would rather they give it a go for everything.
off the back of that, another hypothetical going round is you get to win the Copa America or qualify for Qatar. What are you choosing?
It's too bad they got rid of the Confederation Cup. What was that called? Confederations Cup.
Yeah.
Just because it removes a little bit of significance to the continental cups, and that you don't get something extra out of it. Oh man, see the tough thing is both of those are like dream situations for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very much. I'm sure it's that way for other people. So it's very much a pick which dream comes true, and whichever you pick, it probably means the other one isn't going to happen at all.
Yeah.
You know what? If I had to pick one, it would be qualification for the World Cup, only because I get to see them play in the Copa America every couple of years.
Yeah.
They don't always win it, but I see it. They do it. They play. Sometimes they make it to the whatever, the quarters or semis or whatever.
And I think that's insightful to hear for non-Venezuelan listeners and European football fans, to just hear how much qualifying for a World Cup means to Venezuela. It's the first thing that's rolled out by English-speaking commentators anytime.
Yeah.
Venezuela is
very annoying. Every game I watch, these last two games included, the first talking point. By the way,
never
only not to qualify.
World Cup. It is. I think it would also be a miss, again, just because I think it's so insightful for people that don't follow Venezuelan football closely or are new and just listen out of curiosity. But in the past 48 hours, there's been a lot of talk on Venezuelan football Twitter about a sort of bubbling campaign to or oust Peseiro and bring back Dudamel. There's been, people being accused of being paid to talk highly of one and badly of the other, etc., etc. And it's, for me, it doesn't surprise me because those conversations happen a lot in Venezuelan football, but it does also surprise me because I think a lot of people have short memories. As an outsider, it's easy to look at Venezuela's rise under Dudamel at the FIFA World Rankings and think, well, he obviously did an amazing job. And I think it would be a discredit to say that he didn't do a very good job. But also a lot of Venezuelan football fans were very bored of him come the end, and felt like, he dragged them up, but at what cost? And are they going to ever do anything more under him? So A, do you give these stories any credence? And B, if it ever happened, would you welcome a Dudamel return? Or is that that's something that's happened, it's in the past, leave it there?
Well, I mean, in terms of the belief, I'm sure there's people that would do it. I'm sure there are people that would like it, as much as there's people that would like probably a dozen other different people to be in the position. As far as would I take it, look, I mean, even when we started to talk and know each other, I defended Dudamel actually quite deep into his tenure. But a lot, it's short memory. By the time he left, you couldn't find someone that liked that he had that job. I mean, you literally couldn't find someone defending him. There was, whether it was the style of play or other things. I think now that we've seen how, I'm gonna say horribly, his club coaching career has gone since leaving. I mean, he literally lasted like half a month at Mineros, and then did not do particularly well at Universidad de Chile. I think, and there were people saying this when he had the job. I think that the players might have done more of the work than maybe he did for the improvement in that team. And I don't think his return will help in any way. I think it will just float. It will plateau at where it is. I don't think it'll necessarily make the team worse, but I don't think it's going to improve anything. I think he's shown that when he doesn't have like generational talents around him, that you're not getting much out of him. So I'm not interested in more of that. I'm not.
Yeah, and I think it's Dudamel as a coach. I think and his style of play. I think you do. It's an example very much of, you have to watch him play to understand why people may have those feelings. Because, if you just look at the stats, at Universidad de Chile, he was in charge for, it was 26 games and only lost 6 of them. But then 12 were draws. And in 26 games, they only scored 26 goals. That was only like 1 goal a game.
Right.
And I think that's probably a fair summary of Dudamel football.
And also you have, look, whether or not this would have actually affected like winning trophies or qualifying for things, I'll also say this. If the manager of your national team is creating an environment where key players are exiling themselves, whoever is more right or wrong in this situation, that's a problem. You can't have that. That's not a healthy environment. That's not going to lead to anything good. I know the friendlies went well when Josef wasn't playing, but those are friendlies. Doesn't really matter. It's great that we beat Japan 4-1, but that was a friendly. But, that doesn't really mean anything. So, and all the actual competitions that he was managing us for, other than the U20 World Cup, didn't go very well. So, when you have that environment, even really regardless of how the results are going, to me that's a sign you have to change. If he had gotten us to the World Cup, maybe I wouldn't be saying that, but he did. So, and he actually really did the reverse. So it was a very poor campaign until like the last 2 weeks. I realized he didn't manage the entire campaign, but you get my point. So yeah, no, I don't think anyone needs more of that. I don't think anyone needs more of that.
So to end the episode, I'm going to put you on the spot and we go through the group stage opposition for Copa America. And I just want your win, lose, draw. So, and I'll participate as well. So Brazil, win, lose, or draw?
I'm going to go out on a leg and say draw.
Okay, I'm going lose. Colombia, win, lose, or draw?
Lose. We're going to lose against Colombia.
Yeah, lose 2. So you're on 1 point after 2 games. I think we're on 0. Third game, Ecuador.
Draw.
I'm also on a draw. And finally, Peru.
We're going to beat Peru.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to get in.
That's what I think too. I think it's going to come down to the last group game. And I think we're going to have to win it against Peru to get through. And I think we will. So thank you very much for listening. If you've made it to the end, a little look back at the World Cup qualifiers and mainly a look forward to the Copa America, which starts, if you're listening to this on the day it's released, tomorrow, Sunday, the 13th of June. Just a little word to say what we've got coming up on the Footbay English podcast in the next couple of months. We're going to have a mid-season review of Liga Footbay. Phase 1 has just finished its first quarter. In phase 1, each team plays one another 4 times, and we've just started lap 2 of the games. We've also got an interview with the new Deportivo Lara president, Daniel Villasmil. The former president of Deportivo Lara, Jorge Jimenez, is the new Venezuelan Football Federation president. And we also hope to welcome, scheduling permitting, former Caracas FC captain and now always ready midfielder Robert Hernandez, and Venezuela international goalkeeper Rafael Romo to the show soon. So hopefully you'll stick around for those episodes coming up over the next couple of weeks and months. As always, this is the Footbay English podcast. I'm Jordan and I've been joined today by Dominic. Bye-bye.